Hi, welcome. Hi, Christy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Sarah. Thanks so much for inviting me to this chat.
Yeah, well, everyone that's joining us today, I'm Sarah Sumbrum. I'm Artistic Director of Dance Cleveland. And today I'm joined by Christy Bolingbroke, Executive and Artistic Director of NCC Akron. Welcome today.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
we wanted to have a little chat today about one of our upcoming companies, AIM by Kyle Abraham. We are bringing the company to Playhouse Square to perform on November 6th in partnership with our presentation with Tri-C Performing Arts. And before we talk about the performance, the important part is we wanted to speak with you because NCC Akron was actually instrumental in bringing the company a few years ago in the creation process of An Untitled Love. And that's the piece that the company is going to be performing. It's an evening length work. And Christy, if you want to talk about, the very beginnings of this work, how did that start? And what was that process like when AIM by Kyle Abraham first came to Akron?
Yeah. And I might even zoom out a little bit because this feels, I know we're here to talk about Kyle, but it also feels that it's a big moment for our two organizations.
Yes.
So if there are people tuning in who aren't from Ohio, they might not realize that Cleveland and Akron are about 45 minutes apart from each other.
Short drive.
And just quick, very quick drive. I mean, that's like 10 miles in Los Angeles. And a lot of times I might get asked like, well, why NCC Akron is in Ohio? And so one, I want to acknowledge like we're just celebrating the end of our 5th anniversary. So we are such a nascent organization. Thank you. But one of the reasons we're here is because of Dance Cleveland, is because of your former colleague and predecessor, Pam Young, having that pivotal conversation with the Knight Foundation and the University of Akron and saying, there's only one choreographic center in the country, and that's in Florida, and it's time to have a second one. And so that in itself feels very special, but we have continued to work on small projects here and there. We at NCC Akron support every stage of the creative process and research and development in dance, and Dance Cleveland being, on the other end of the process and like come buy a ticket, come see a show for a work that we've been working on to come full circle with y'all and to be able to say to everyone in Northeast Ohio and nearby, come experience this live. That feels really important. And I'm so grateful, selfishly, just to get to see the work live after being there, now 2 years ago, to witness some of its early gestation.
And I think you bring up a good point. That was really one of the goals when Dance Cleveland started thinking about this half-baked idea of a choreographic center in Northeast Ohio. And, obviously Dance Cleveland's a presenter. We bring companies here to perform, but so much happens before the performance takes place. And I think that a lot of audience members don't realize that creation process can happen years in advance before a piece actually premieres. And Kyle's piece just premiered this past September in Chicago. So that process has been long coming. And we're so excited, like you said, that Northeast Ohio is not only going to be a place where it's going to be performed, but that full circle, that dream that we had has actually come to fruition. So yeah.
And interesting also, I think, for the region, this particular project with Kyle, like getting to know he and his dancers a little bit more. Kyle grew up in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, for those that are not as geographically touched in, is also within driving distance, maybe an hour and a half from Akron. And so it was really interesting to welcome him here. And he told us stories of he and I think his mother and sister like driving to Akron to get their hair done growing up. I was like, oh my God, like here we're hosting you and you're telling me about Akron and Northeast Ohio. And I think there's something deeply personal in this work about let's see, going back, I think to my knowledge, I think both of Kyle's parents have since moved on and become ancestors. And so this idea of positive representations of Black love, of intergenerational conversations around Black love, this was the kind of thing that Kyle was interested in when he came to Akron. And we talked through and tried a couple of different things, everything from having a meal with a nearby senior citizen center that was predominantly African American, to being willing, the dancers, to go out. They wanted to have conversations. They wanted to talk over cards and discussions and games, so that it's a little less, we're making art and art is good for you, but really inviting people to share their own personal experiences. And what is it to be a part of a community? And then how does that reflect onto the stage? And I think that there's a lot that Kyle's been playing with in that regard too, in terms of representation. Is it a heteronormative cisgender coupling? Is it same-sex coupling? Is it always a love couple? Like, Black love doesn't always have to be romantic love as well. Right. And that was really exciting to see how they were finding their way into that, because it wasn't just going into the studio, turning on the music and working in a vacuum, but they really were interested in coming out and talking to people. So this is informed by what I would call dance civilians into their making process. They're like, oh, okay, this is great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to Kyle earlier this week, and he talked about how he wanted this piece to also be a little bit of a tribute to his parents. So I thought that was really touching. But back to the Ohio connection, his parents, I learned, actually went to a Black college here in Ohio at some point. So they were in Ohio too. So there's the Pittsburgh connection, but also the Ohio connection.
I like to say all roads dance through Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people think that dancers go into a dance studio and they just start moving and playing with movement. And that can be true, but I think there's a lot of research that usually goes into it ahead of time. And like you said, just that sense of community and getting to feel that sense of community. So whether it's having meals with elders in the community. So really, I think this piece, it's safe to say that it sounds like the process that he went through at NCC Akron, he really got to know a little bit of our Ohio community. And that's going to be directly impactful on the piece itself. I know he mentioned also that the dancers, he often asks them to bring a article or bring a movie or an album, things like that were inspirational to them in the 90s, because this piece, of course, is kind of has that 90s feel with the full soundtrack to D'Angelo, of course. But I think you're right. It's not just about the movement in the studio. It's what happens around the studio process as well.
And then the only other thing that I would add to that, because a lot of times people will say, well, why does NCC Akron support one project or not another? I mean, we are here to advance the craft of choreography. It's not just to get more new works done or new, innovate. And what I really appreciate about how Kyle is advancing choreography is we can talk about representation and certainly uplifting Black love on stage, but thinking about just challenging the traditional idea of a duet or a pas de deux in a lot of, ballet and conventional dance making. That's really exciting to have been a part of, supporting, and then to have that come out into the world and to continue to inform people's perception of who dances together too.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note that, throughout this whole piece, you see all different types of relationships. Like you said, it can be love. It could also be different stages of love or different stages of relationships and different pairings, like you said. So I know Kyle earlier this week, he said, he wanted it to feel like you're kind of just in the living room and thinking back to when you're a kid and you might be at one of your parents' family parties, but you're still younger and you're kind of just taking it all in. and observing what's going on around you. I definitely think, there's a couch on the stage, there's plants, so you feel that, you feel like you're immersed in this social party or this household, really.
It's real approachable. Yeah, for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to share about NCC Akron and just that process and what it was like to have Kyle on the ground?
I mean, it now, of course, on the earlier side of COVID, because we're talking about June 2019. And I know that wasn't the last time that Kyle worked on the piece. And it was still a very rich week. When they come here on the ground, when any artist, they have access to this space from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. So we try to make it as porous and broad as possible. What I am constantly surprised by, and I think a lot of people don't realize this in dance making, there's an estimate out there, it's almost unquantifiable, but for every minute you see on stage, that's estimated at least 8 hours of rehearsal process.
That's a great point.
And it's not linear either. So what I'm kind of excited to see is like, what made it on the cutting room floor? When I last saw this material 2 years ago, not all of it got carried forward. And that's a special gift to be a part of the process. Is we often get to see things that are just a half step towards the finished work that audiences are going to get to see at Playhouse Square.
Yeah, you get that sneak peek. That never before seen, that you don't know if it's going to make it in or not. It's
like early drafts, right? When writers are working on manuscripts and things, and then whole chapters get excised, or just one particular character gets carried forward. So I'm really excited to see how it's grown and evolved.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note is dance has an editing process. There's a lot of work that gets created that audiences will never ever actually see. So I'm curious to see that as well. I saw it at APAP in New York City in a showing right before COVID happened. And that small excerpt was one iteration of this dance, but it's formed and changed and grown since then. So I agree. It's going to be really special to be able to see the full length piece on stage in the theater at Playhouse Square. So Christy, thank you for joining us. I'm excited to see what the partnership between DANCECleveland and NCC Akron can hold as we continue on, and what other full circles might end up happening. So again, if you need tickets for Kyle Abraham's performance November 6th at Playhouse Square, you can go to dancecleveland.org or call 216-241-6000. Thanks again, Christy. We'll talk soon.
All right.